Welcome to this second video about the disappearance of Leanne Goodall 46 years ago on the 30th of December 1978. Now, I did originally plan to only make two videos, but I will be making a little extra one after this one. Now, if you haven't already, you might want to watch the first video before watching this one. I'll put a link in the description. Now, in this video, I intend to discuss such things as a report that was made by an old school friend of Leanne's that she spent about 10 or 15 minutes speaking to her on the afternoon of her disappearance near the Star Hotel. Now, after that, I'll move on to another report, which is a bit less credible, from another person she went to school with, who claims that he saw her with Ivan Milat at Wyong Leagues Club about a year after she disappeared. Next, I will discuss a phone call that was made to Leanne's family about 10 years after she disappeared by someone who was claiming he was her husband. I'll then discuss a memorial service that was held by Leanne's family in 2002. I'll move on then to discussing how the reward for information about Leanne's disappearance is still only $100,000, even though there have been calls for it to be raised to $1 million since 1999. And I'll finish off this video by discussing persons of interest that were considered at the time of the inquest in 2002, as well as a current person of interest. And in the next and final video, I intend to summarize some of the information that I consider most relevant, and then I will also discuss my own thoughts and conclusions regarding Leanne and her disappearance. So I'll begin by discussing the evidence that was provided by Leanne's school friend, who police described as a very credible witness at the time. This was reported in the Newcastle Herald on the 20th of June 2001. School friend reveals vital last sighting by Greg Vent. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's either that or Went. Catherine Pearson didn't realise the significance of her girls' talk with Leanne Goodall outside Newcastle Star Hotel back in 1978. I am aware now I was probably the last person to see Leanne alive, the community nurse told Toronto Coroner's Court yesterday. There were emotional scenes outside the inquest as Mrs. Pearson hugged Leanne Goodall's family after giving her evidence, which has changed the course of the investigation. On the eve of the appearance before the inquest of convicted backpacker killer Ivan Milat, State Coroner John Abernathy was told that Mrs. Pearson's evidence was vital. Mr. Abernathy is holding a 3-week inquest into the circumstances of the disappearance of Ms. Goodall, 20, and fellow Novocastrians, 18-year-old dental nurse Robin Hickey and 14-year-old schoolgirl Amanda Robinson. The inquest heard that for many years it was believed the last sighting of Ms. Goodall was when her brother, Warren, put her on a train at Muswellbrook Station on the afternoon of December 30, 1998. Now, obviously, that's a typo, should be 1978. Counsel assisting the coroner, Patrick Sadie, said that changed when Mrs. Pearson gave information to investigators attached to Strikeforce Fenwick in October 1997. Mrs. Pearson of Lake Munmora, that's on the Central Coast, told the court yesterday she had been with her husband, who was now dead. So, unfortunately, that leaves no other living second witness who could help confirm and add strength to what Mrs. Pearson has said. So, yes, so she says she told them that she had been with him on the footpath at the Star Hotel when she saw Miss Goodall, her former schoolmate from Wyong High, walking towards her. Leanne looked great, she said. She was carrying a bag like an overnight bag, which seemed full, and it was good to see her. It had been some time since I had seen Leanne, and it was great to catch up and talk girls' talk. Mrs. Pearson gave evidence that she distinctly remembered the day was the Saturday before New Year's Eve. Leanne was always well dressed, she said. She said she had just got off the train, and I recall her talking about New Year's Eve, and that which she was looking forward to spending time catching up with family and friends. Now, she was only meant to be seeing friends for New Year's, so might be just a little memory problem there, perhaps. Anyway, we chatted for probably 10 to 15 minutes. She mentioned her bag and that it was a bit of a nuisance if she wanted to go in the pub. Now, I find the mentioning of the bag being a nuisance was interesting. As in my last video, I did mention that the friend in Sydney who received the phone call saying that she wasn't attending her New Year's Eve party indicated it was because she'd had her bag and wallet stolen. So that could tie up somehow. The Newcastle Herald on the 9th of January 1998 adds further information and says the two spoke at the hotel about 4 p.m. and Miss Goodall told her friend that she was going to put her carry bag behind the bar. So, could she have left her wallet in the bag and the bag with her wallet went missing while it was behind the bar? And that could have resulted in Leanne changing her plans, which none of her family would have known about. Anyway, it's at least something to think about. But getting back to the 2001 Newcastle Herald article and Catherine Pearson's evidence, she then walked towards the entrance of the hotel and sort of disappeared in the crowd of people. I never saw her again. Mrs. Pearson said she did not realise the significance of the encounter for many years. I heard along the grapevine a long time after that Leanne had gone missing, but didn't know when, she said. Then, many years later, I saw Leanne's sister Pam. When I told her I had seen Leanne, she said the police would be very interested in that information. Now, it seems at the time, the credibility put on her evidence and how vital it was very, very high. But since that time, that credibility does seem to have diminished. Now, that's not to say that Leanne's friend was lying or that she wasn't the last one to see her on that day. It's just whether she did see her on that day might have some doubt, because it was so long after that she reported it to police, which I assume was when she became aware of the date Leanne disappeared, which was nearly 19 years later. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that her memory may have got dates confused, or perhaps even the year. Perhaps it was another year just before New Year's Eve. And so it does lower the reliability of her evidence. I have also heard at the time police may have had a bit of bias, which was probably unintentional, to giving her evidence greater credibility, and they may have been more enthusiastic about accepting it, as it seems it was probably the only strong lead they had as to Leanne's movements after she caught the train at Muswellbrook, or at least after her brother Warren dropped her off. Anyway, about 6 months ago, on the 29th of July 2024, NBN Television News aired an interview with Leanne's sister where she gave her thoughts on when Leanne was last seen.
Several years later, a person came forward to police to say she saw Leanne that night at the Star Hotel, a line of inquiry investigated in the late 1990s by Strikeforce Fenwick. Pam, while appreciative, now believes it's possible that may be a mix-up given the passage of time.
I just sort of feel as though that, it could have been mistaken. Whether she even actually got on a train at Muswellbrook, everything's doubtful because the police never even investigated anything. They never did a thing.
In addition, I have noticed on the online New South Wales Police Missing Persons Register that for Leanne it states Leanne was last seen on 30 December 1978 at Muswellbrook. So it does seem that even the New South Wales Police now regard her last confirmed sighting as being at Muswellbrook. But I do think it's still important to keep Catherine Pearson's evidence in mind, as it may actually be correct. It's just we don't have as strong confidence now as we did in the past. Now, it's good to keep it in mind because it may have some relevance to information that is already known or may come to light at some future date. For example, the information about her bag and Wendy McDonald's evidence about it being stolen, then you can come up with scenarios as to what might have happened there. Anyway, I'll now move on to that other report from someone else who knew Leanne from school, and he believes he saw her about a year after she disappeared. This was also in the Newcastle Herald on the same day, the 20th of June 2001. Leanne and Milat in Club. Witness by Les Kennedy. William Francis Crookes, I've probably got that wrong, but I'll do my best with that name, of Yarrawong, was adamant he saw the backpacker serial killer Ivan Milat at Wyong Leagues Club, sitting at a table close to Leanne Goodall in December 1979, roughly 12 months after she allegedly disappeared from Newcastle. His persistent claims that he had seen the 20-year-old art student near Milat led to rigorous questioning yesterday from the state coroner, Mr. John Abernathy, and barrister Robert Kavanagh for the Goodall family, at an inquest into her disappearance and unsolved fate of two other Newcastle females 22 years ago. Mr. Kavanagh had tersely quizzed Mr. Carooks about why he never mentioned Milat in a 1998 statement to police investigating Goodall's disappearance. But on June 7, now that's 2 weeks before this evidence he's giving to the inquest in 2001, he made a second statement to police saying he had seen Milat in the club's newly opened auditorium in December 1979, sitting at a table 3 chairs away from Ms. Goodall, who was with another unidentified man. The construction worker said he knew Goodall from attending Wyong High School with her. While he was not a friend, he had no doubt he saw her. Mr. Carooks told the inquest at Toronto Courthouse yesterday that he made the recent updated statement to police after seeing a television report on the convicted killer of 7 hitchhiking backpackers in which footage of Milat was shown. He had never seen a picture of the killer until then, nor had he bothered to mention the 1979 Wyong Leagues Club sighting to Ms. Goodall's sister Pamela in 1987 or 1988 when she told him her sister was missing. Now, I guess it's possible he mightn't have thought about it and recalled it after seeing her, but anyway. Leanne was with another person, Mr. Carooks said. Milat was next to him. I said to the investigating police that she was there with a grey-haired fellow, with a grey mow. He had a cowboy hat on, a white hat. It was Ivan Milat. Now, the original Sydney Morning Herald article that the Newcastle Herald one came from did have additional information. And this says, in his 1998 statement to police, he said another Wyong High School mate, Mr. Ross Isserif, told him of seeing Goodall at Muswellbrook Railway Station on December 30, 1978, the day she disappeared after travelling on a train to Newcastle. But Mr. Isserif denied the 1978 sighting, saying that he saw Goodall sometime in 1977 standing on a platform at Broadmeadow Railway Station. He, that's Mr. Carooks, agreed with counsel assisting the coroner, the barrister, Mr. Patrick Sadie, that the fact the club's new auditorium was not opened until a year after Goodall disappeared meant his evidence was unreliable. This last part about the auditorium is a bit confusing, but I think it probably should say that the new auditorium hadn't been opened yet the year after Leanne disappeared. Now, I did a bit of searching and I found a Facebook post made by Save Central Coast, which gives some information about the Wyong Leagues Club's history. And it says, around 1984, renovations that included the present auditorium were completed. So it says about 1984, so it's not an exact date, but it is well after 1979. So that indicates the auditorium was opened well after he claims he saw her in the auditorium. Anyway, from the information in those newspaper articles, Mr. Karook's memory of dates, etc., does make his information seem pretty much unreliable. Though extremely unlikely, if he did see Leanne in the new auditorium, it would have to have been at least 4 or 5 years after he claimed he saw her. So I can understand why his information was considered very unreliable and dismissed pretty much because of that. Moving on, about 10 years after Leanne disappeared, the Goodall family received a phone call from a man who claimed he was Leanne's husband, and this was reported in the Australian on the 7th of August 2002. And it's headed Journeys into the Unknown. Beth Leanne will never forget the night she answered the telephone at her Newcastle home and a man introduced himself as her daughter's husband. Her daughter Leanne Goodall had been missing for 10 years, and she cried tears of joy and relief at the prospect of seeing her alive again. The whole family was crying. We were all on the phone, howling our heads off because we thought we'd found her and we were that excited, she says. He told us they were married, had 3 children, and didn't live far away. He seemed so genuine. We were convinced we had found her. Her new son-in-law promised to send photos of Leanne and the children and call again in a couple of days. But the photos didn't arrive, and she never heard from him again. It wasn't long before the family realised they were the victims of a cruel hoax. Now, I can understand why they wanted to believe it, even though it was likely it was a hoax. I can never understand what some people get out of being so cruel to other people who are already suffering. I don't think I need to comment any further. I think you get the idea. I will just move on and I'll talk about the memorial service that was held for Leanne after the inquest in 2002, and this was reported in the Newcastle Herald on the 26th of November 2002. Family service to celebrate life. Say goodbye to beloved Leanne by Greg Vent. For almost 24 years, Beth Leanne has been on a painful search for her missing daughter. This Sunday, actually it was on the Saturday at 10:30 a.m, Mrs. Leanne will plant a tree in memory of her daughter, Leanne Goodall, following a special service to celebrate her life. The memorial service at St. Luke's Uniting Church, Belmont, will give some closure after years of grief. The Leanne, Goodall and Mitchell families and friends will attend. In July, State Coroner John Abernathy brought down his findings into the disappearances of Leanne in 1978 and teenagers Robin Hickey and Amanda Robinson 5 months later. Actually, it was only about 3 or 4 months later. After a coronial inquest, Mr. Abernathy found that Leanne Goodall died on or shortly after December 30, 1978, as the result of homicide by a person or persons unknown. The inquest was held after the missing girls' cases were reopened by Strikeforce Fenwick in 1997. Now, Strikeforce Fenwick wasn't actually formed until March 1998, but there were several other strike forces in 1997 where they were individually looking at various disappearances, and they were merged into Strikeforce Fenwick in 1998. The article goes on. Mr. Abernathy said that despite her family reporting her missing the day after she disappeared, only cursory inquiries were made by police. As I explained in the last video, it seems more likely that Leanne's disappearance wasn't realised by the family and reported to police until at least a week or two after her disappearance. Leanne was last seen by a friend outside Newcastle Star Hotel, and this is not considered as strongly now. Mrs. Lean said yesterday that the service would help the family move on as best they could. We will never forget her. She will always be in our thoughts. The memorial service will give some closure and help us cope with our grief, she said. Now, the plaque that was made for the memorial service was inscribed with the following words: "In loving memory of Leanne Beth Goodall, abducted December 30th, 1978, aged 20 years, dearly loved by her family, in God's loving care." Now, it does say abducted there. I guess that's the most probable thing that happened. But in reality, that's not even really clear because of the poor investigations at the time. All we really know is she disappeared and something happened to her. So I'll now move on to the rewards for information that could lead to an arrest and conviction. And no rewards were offered into any of the three girls' disappearances until nearly 18 and a half years after Leanne's disappearance. And this was on the 18th of May 1997. The reward offered was $100,000 and was part of the notice offering the same reward in relation to the disappearances of Robin Hickey, Amanda Robinson, Amanda Zolis, and Gordana Katevsky. The Newcastle Herald reported as early as the 18th of June 1999, so about 2 years later, that the families were seeking the reward be increased to $1 million. And the article's headed, "Parents plea for $1 million reward. Need to break wall of silence around missing girls," by Greg Vent. The families of 4 young women missing from the Newcastle area are seeking a $1 million reward offer from the state government. They believe that it would take a substantial reward for information to break the wall of silence that's surrounding the mystery of their missing children. The state government is believed to be close to making a decision on recommendations for a substantial increase in the original reward of $100,000. Dan Lean, the stepfather of missing woman Leanne Goodall, said yesterday from his Belmont home that a $1 million reward offer would be well spent if it brought forward information that solved the puzzling disappearances. Leanne, 20, who disappeared on December 30, 1978, is one of at least 4 missing people being investigated by detectives from Strikeforce Fenwick during the past 18 months. Any increase would be welcome, but it is my view that it will require a substantial reward in the order of $1 million at least to crack that wall of silence, Mr. Lean said. It is my view that there is only a small number of people who know something. They could be fearful to come forward with information, or they may have loyalty to someone. The offer of $1 million would probably make them think twice about their fears or loyalty to the people who have committed these crimes. Mr. Lean said that compared to the cost of the police investigation, the $1 million reward would be a small investment. But if the offer is not successful, then the money would stay in the state's coffers, he said. Now, this article from 1999 did say the state government is believed to be close to making a decision on increasing those rewards. But no increase occurred for any of the girls at that time, or even after the inquest that concluded 3 years later. It was not until over 22 years later, in August 2021, that the reward was increased for any of the missing girls, and it was only increased for Robin Hickey and Amanda Robinson to the $1 million originally asked. The following year, in May 2022, the reward in regards to Gordana Katevsky's disappearance was also increased to $1 million. These 3 disappearances have been investigated by Strikeforce Arapaima since 2019. Leanne's case is not included as part of that Strikeforce, as they're only looking at cases that were in the Lake Macquarie area, and it's believed she either disappeared in Newcastle or Muswellbrook. And it seems that as her case is not currently being considered by any strike force and is simply sitting in with the unsolved homicide squad's files, that reward hasn't been increased and still sits at $100,000. So this fact and how Leanne's sister Pamela feels about it was reported on NBN Television News about 6 months ago on the 29th of July 2024.
$1 million rewards have been announced for other high-profile Hunter cases. Leanne's has long been $100,000.
It's always a hole in your heart. You know, it's like she's the forgotten child. And that hurts a lot.
Moving on to persons of interest, at the end of the 2002 inquest, the Newcastle Herald reported on the 6th of July 2002 that the only 2 of the 6 persons of interest that could not be excluded in relation to the disappearance of Leanne Goodall were Ivan Milat and Kelvin Macy. The article states, in the late 1970s, he, that's Ivan Milat, had definite links to the Hunter region as a road worker and stayed in places such as the Arana Hotel Blacksmiths, the Star Hotel Newcastle, which at the time was where they considered Leanne was last seen, Gunya Hotel Belmont, Golden Eagle Motel Gateshead, and Pelican Palms at Swansea. I think it's actually at Mark's Point. During the period the girls went missing in 1978 and 1979, Mr. Abernathy said. One cannot discount the involvement of Ivan Milat in any of the disappearances, particularly that of Leanne Goodall. Now, you might suspect that because it was thought she was last seen at the Star Hotel. His report said that Kelvin Macy had a significant criminal record and presented as a witness who was evasive. Notwithstanding the fact that superficially Mr. Macy may be able to account for his whereabouts for the nights of April 7 and 20, 1979, I am not satisfied the strength of information excludes Mr. Macy as a person of interest with respect to any of the girls, the coroner said in his findings. Now, whilst they couldn't be excluded as persons of interest at the time, there was no strong evidence either to strongly and directly link them with any of the disappearances. So it was still a bit up in the air after that inquest. Now, the disappearances of Leanne Goodall, Robin Hickey and Amanda Robinson have always been considered as most probably linked, and many people have felt, and still do, that Ivan Milat was responsible for their disappearances. However, doubts about his involvement in the disappearances of these girls also exists, as they didn't seem to fit his modus operandi. In particular, that with other murders he's known to have committed, he didn't make much of an effort to hide their bodies, maybe just throwing a few sticks and leaves over them. And the bodies of these girls who disappeared in the Newcastle area, none of them have ever been located. Now, Australia's ABC reported on the 26th of October 2019, former Assistant Police Commissioner Clive Small led the team of officers who arrested Australia's backpacker killer in May 1994. So he obviously has a lot of knowledge of Ivan Milat and how he operated. While Mr. Small does not think Milat killed Leanne Goodall, the veteran detective said there was solid evidence to suggest an eighth victim, Peter Letcher. Then, in an interview in the Daily Telegraph on the 8th of July 2018, John Abernathy, who was the coroner at the 2002 inquest, said he believed the disappearances were linked and they are victims of a serial killer or a gang of killers, but he doesn't offer an opinion on who that or they could have been. Now, currently, it does seem the strongest person of interest is Warren McCorriston, and he was identified by Strikeforce Arapaima in 2019 as responsible for a number of violent sexual assaults, and this included several in the Newcastle area dating back to 1980, which is around the time of these disappearances. It is known that he knew Robin Hickey as he went to the same school as her, and around the time of her disappearance, he was also catching the same bus as her when travelling to work in Newcastle. It is also believed that he, with several others who are now known and convicted pedophiles, was at the Swansea Bowling Club on the night of Amanda Robinson's disappearance, and she would have had to walk past that club on her way home. And in regards to Leanne Goodall, it is known that he lived only 2 streets from Leanne Goodall's mother, and that was where she was planning to spend the night, or as far as we know, she was planning to spend the night there when she disappeared. So, whilst Warren McCorriston does currently appear to be the strongest person of interest, I would caution that this is still circumstantial and that he's never been charged in relation to any of the disappearances. And the truth could still involve someone else that hasn't even been identified yet. But I'll finish up there, and in my next video I will summarise the most relevant bits of information from the 2 previous videos, and I will also discuss my own thoughts and conclusions regarding Leanne and her disappearance. To be notified when I upload this next video, please subscribe and click on the bell. I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and if you'd like to support me to make more, you can do so at Patreon. I'm David A. Elliott. Have a good one, and see you around. Like a Rissole.